August 31st, 2021. Good day all. This is a message from Sierra Victor. We continue with message number 9 of counter-guerrilla operations with FM 90-8/MCRP 333A as reference and discuss counterinsurgency operations. As described in chapters 1 and 2, the nature of counter-guerrilla operations differs from the conditions most soldiers expect to face in combat. The counter-guerrilla commander faces an enemy whose objectives, tactics, and concepts are usually different from his own. This chapter examines the role of tactical counter-guerrilla operations in relation to the COIN program. In addition, it discusses planning considerations and principles for the successful conduct of counter-guerrilla operations, as well as related operations that the counter-guerrilla force must be acquainted with. The primary consideration when planning counter-guerrilla operations is the effect operations will have on the populace. Commanders must attempt to win the active support of the population for own forces. At a minimum, counter-guerrilla activities must eliminate incidents which the guerrilla may exploit in his psychological operations and use for propaganda. In today's world with smartphones and instant global internet with especially social media, whatever you do must have the least chance of swaying national and international opinion away from your cause. The main objective would be to defeat or neutralize the guerrilla forces as soon as possible, so the country can begin or resume functioning normal again. Internal defense operations fall into 6 areas. Intelligence operations, psychological operations, populace and resources control operations, military civic action, and tactical operations, both strike and consolidation. The enemy. When evaluating the guerrilla capabilities and limitations, the commander considers 1. National and regional origins. 2. Organization, to include effectiveness and unity of command. 3. Strength, morale, and status of training. 4. Tactics being employed and tactical proficiency. 5. Capability to attack, defend, and reinforce. 6. Resources available: A. Food and water. B. Arms, ammunition, demolitions, fuels, medicines as well as external support like personnel, material, and morale. 7. Leaders and their personalities. 8. Relations with the civilian population. 9. Status of supplies. 10. Effectiveness of communications. 11. Effectiveness of intelligence and counterintelligence, to include the extent of infiltration of the government civil and military establishments. 12. Lines of communications. 13. Vulnerabilities. 14. External support. Terrain and weather. When evaluating the effects of terrain and weather on counter-guerrilla operations, the commander considers suitability of terrain, to include landing zones and pickup zones, and road nets for tactical and logistical operations. As with weather, particular attention is focused on the effects the terrain has on men, equipment, visibility, and mobility. Assets. Successful counter-guerrilla operations depend upon the commander utilizing his available assets to maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. To do this, the commander realistically appraises the capabilities and limitations of his assets and then organizes and employs them on suitable missions. Oftentimes, the commander finds he lacks assets which would greatly facilitate mission accomplishment. In these instances, he should request what he needs from his higher headquarters. If his needs cannot be met, he has the option of improvising a solution or doing without. Command and control. The peculiar circumstances of counter-guerrilla warfare require that senior commanders allow subordinate leaders, at all levels, a great deal of flexibility in accomplishing their missions. Planning time is often extremely limited. Warning and operation orders are normally issued orally. In these instances, the 1/3 rule applies. The commander utilizes 1/3 of the available time for his own planning and allows 2/3 of the available time for his subordinates to develop their plans and issue their orders. Time is relative during counter-guerrilla operations. Victory will not be when all enemy forces are defeated, but rather when the political, economic, and social problems which led to it are corrected or significantly alleviated. This usually takes a considerable length of time. Be aware of propaganda traps. The guerrilla will attempt to lure own forces into it by engaging own forces at locations where action would endanger civilians or damage their property. While the temptation to return fire may be great, a few dead or injured enemy will in no way compensate for the ill will of the local populace or international view if some innocent civilians are killed or injured or their homes and property destroyed. Due to WhatsApp audio length, we keep our message between 5 and 10 minutes. In our next message, we will continue and then we'll look at operating principles. Please visit our Dropbox account for all our previous material. Links can be obtained from any admin on the Sierra Victor groups. Thank you for listening or reading this message. Please feel free to use and distribute as needed. Our messages are not by any means enticing you to a revolution of sorts, but rather to equip you with the necessary theoretical background in order to assist local armed forces or police in stabilizing a SHTF situation. We wish you well. Sierra Victor.